This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you watch your A game. A made no lanes on the track when we unite and spit. This isn't A game, better bring your A game. Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you watch your A game. A made no lanes on the track when we unite.
Show, and I'm your host, Mike Gilbert, and I'm joined as always by JD by God Oliva. How you doing, JD?
I was just telling you before the show, man. I have I've bit off more than I can chew with teaching and running the broadcast department, and now we've got wrestling with both the high school kids and the little kids, and I've got grad school and the show, and I'm freaking frazzled. I'm not gonna lie. I'm absolutely exhausted.
How are you? Dude, I'm good. I do feel you. So, quick programming note. Next Thursday night, I don't know if you guys know this or not. If you're in America, next Thursday night is Thanksgiving. So we will not be going live on Thanksgiving. We're like Impact. We're taking the week off. So we will not be live here next week. But for those of you who are not Patreon subscribers, JD and I did a two-part series on the WCW invasion of the WWF in 2001, where we kind of go in at the very last couple of months of WCW's existence, and then on into Vince buying WCW, and then WCW making their way into WWF, and then the ECW, and then the whole invasion angle, the pay-per-view, all the way up from about January 2001 all the way through November of 2001. When the whole thing was over. So we did a two-part series about that earlier this year. It's been exclusive to the Patreon. It has not been put anywhere else. So you guys will get to hear that right here on this, right here on YouTube, on the Voices of Wrestling podcast feed, our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everything. I'm going to put that two-part series together. I'm going to release that to everybody for free. And that's what you guys will get next week right here on Thanksgiving.
I feel that was one of our best overtime. I think that actually bridged the two networks, didn't it?
It did. We started it on Fight Game Media, and it was kind of like because we were doing stuff for their Patreon, and we didn't even call it overtime. It was just Mike and JD Show Extra, and we were just gonna do historical stuff for that. And then when we came over to Voices of Wrestling, we finished the two-part series on overtime. So when people do hear it, they're gonna probably hear me do some Fight Game Media stuff, and then this is gonna go into like Voices of for overtime. But you know, it's because we did it over like a couple of month period.
Yeah, it's a lot of change this year for the two of us.
Yeah, I just got a new job. I mean, I'm still in the Air Force, but I switched positions. So they gave me a position with more responsibility, same pay. So that's good.
I switched careers.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Yeah, I just started that new job this week, and I think yesterday I went into work at like 6 a.m. and I didn't get home till 7:30 last night because and I told you offline, JD, I can't really say what happened in public, but it was quite the interesting night that I had last night. But because of that, after lunch today, I got all my stuff done right around lunchtime. I just took the hell off and I came home and I went to the gym, and I've just been chilling at the house ever since.
That's good. Good for you. I've been said I'm getting to work about 7:30. I'm leaving school about 8:30. So good. Putting in about a good 13-hour day, just about every day this week. We have a half day tomorrow. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I'm stoked.
Yeah. You know what I'm stoked about? We talked to our buddy John Muse about coming on. We've been trying to get him back on for a long time. And JD,
I keep checking my phone, my watch to see if he's texting me.
He's in the green room right now. Let me go ahead and bring John in. I don't even know, we didn't really plan this one very well.
That's what we do.
This was not a part of our group chat. So you guys have your own little personal chat going on that I was not privy to. But part of that conversation you guys had was you inviting him on, and he gladly accepted.
Well, I figured if I invited him on in the group chat, that would then you would see that, because you're not exactly a non-persuasive individual. Like
Yeah.
if I threw that out there, I know you would have read that cue and been like, "Hey,
Yeah.
yeah, you should do that." So like,
Yeah.
I was trying to like ease John into this idea because I knew
Yeah.
Mike can come on a little strong sometimes.
Yeah. But John Muse, welcome back to the show, man. We love talking to you. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you guys? Can you hear me well? I'm on the phone. I couldn't get
You
video going, but
no,
You sound
you're fine.
shockingly good, actually.
Yeah. So what I've noticed is that with the cell phone and just on the browser on the phone, people sound really good. It's like much like a phone call or a Skype call. We've done call-in shows in the past, and people just click the link on their phone, and they sound pretty good.
yeah, I had no idea how this was going to work, but I'm happy it does. Now I'm going to do something Dave does to Brian. Did you guys see Osprey versus Alexander?
No.
My new routine, John, because I'm so far behind everybody. Like you're in Michigan, he's in Chicago, so I'm 4 hours behind you guys. That comes on at a weird part of the day for me. Today it came on at 3:30 p.m. So I could not watch it, and that was like one of the reasons why we moved off of doing an Impact show together, because I just had a lot of trouble watching the show before we went live on air. So what I do is by the time I'm done with this show recording, my family's already like getting ready for bed and stuff like that. So then I'll go downstairs and I'll actually get to watch Impact. So I'm really looking forward to it. But what did you think of it, man?
Oh, I liked it a lot. They do something. I'm not going to spoil anything since you guys haven't seen it, and maybe listeners haven't seen it as well. Osprey does a little something in there that feeds into what Alexander does, and it's just really good. It's a great match. Osprey's having like the best year ever.
Yeah.
So that's all I can say there. Just watch the match, enjoy it. It's all fun. Osprey's the GOAT.
He's the slam dunk for the Flair Thez this year, right? There's like not even a real contender.
Well, there's people who are out there arguing that, yeah, but I don't listen to those people because they're crazy. Sorry if you're one of them. Anybody out there?
Well, hey
no,
guys,
I'm serious. He's the guy.
Can I stop you guys real quick? So the three of us know exactly what the Flair Thez is.
Oh,
can JD, can you explain what Flair Thez means to the non-Wrestling Observer newsletter subscriber?
Do we have that kind of a fan that ever listens? The Flair Thez is the MVP of not the rest, not like the most value. I would say he's like the most valuable player, right, in the professional wrestling world. Like the guy who's made the most impact in the sport of professional wrestling during the year.
Yeah, and there's like little pieces involved. What happens is people get stuck on, well, he wasn't a world champ and he wasn't necessarily main eventing and some things like that are supposed to be components, right? And people have a hard time understanding anomalies, right? They don't understand something that's so rare. And this is what this is. This is rare that somebody's having such a great year. And it's also kind of a down year in other areas. So, there's not a clear-cut runaway guy. Meanwhile, we've got a guy out there who's got the best match in like 4 promotions, 4 countries. What is there else to? What else is there to say about that? He's having a great year. He's the guy. Write it down.
He's the most consistently great performer that we've seen this year. He might have had the greatest, as far as in ring, he might have had the greatest year of all time. I think, people will dispute that, but I think it's going to be difficult. If you just take a look at the statistics and not only the star ratings from Dave, but the cage match ratings, I think they're going to compare to anybody. And I'm sure somebody will do a deep dive. But as John was saying,
done it.
Yeah. And as John was saying, he has done that in so many different promotions. And I can speak as a guy that has a TNA podcast. He literally just came over to TNA for Bound for Glory and had the absolute greatest match in TNA history with Speedball Bailey. And then less than a week later has another probably close to 5-star match with Eddie Edwards. And then tonight on Impact, and I have not watched it yet, but people are saying that it's, right around that 4.5 to 5 stars with Josh Alexander too.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that and I've done the deep dive that you talked about, right? Because I had to do it for the Ishii case. Hopefully we get great news on Ishii in the next, 8 hours or so. Yeah.
Well, I asked Dave to release it by the time we record, but he has not done that for us. So if you guys are watching or if you're in the chat and that news gets broken, you just let me know and then we'll go breaking news and we'll reveal the Hall of Famers. But go ahead, John.
Oh, it's all good. I did some. Basically for the Ishii case, I had to do a deep dive into cage match ratings, Dave's ratings, things like that.
Hey.
And he came, Osprey came out ahead of people. He was tied with Kobashi, I believe. And I mean, obviously we don't have the good sampling with Kobashi, but he came out at the top. So
Yeah.
he's got the numbers, and that was before like the last few great matches he's had. That was before the Bailey match. That was before the match he had against Zack Sabre Jr.
And
Dude,
Uemura too, right? Yeah.
real quick, we got a little shout out in our chat room, right? Jason Bryant, who you guys might not know is, but he is the voice of amateur wrestling. This dude runs the biggest amateur wrestling podcast network around, and he good buddy of mine from back in the day. Like, he's actually showing up listening to some pro wrestling talk tonight. Hey Jason, thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
sorry, I just wanted to got a minor celebrity watching tonight.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here, Jason. I really appreciate
Right now
that.
the pressure just ramped up.
Well, I don't know if you know who you are, so it's it's funny to mention that, because like when I first started writing, right, and I was getting some traction with some stuff, John started following me on Twitter, and he started messaging me, and I'll be honest, I think I told you I had no idea who John Muse was, because I was not. We joked about the Flair Thez and what that means, and Observer readers. I didn't start reading the Observer until 3 years ago, something like that. And then Garrett Gonzalez, our former boss, was like, hey, you know who John Muse is? And I said, I do not. Educate me. And he said, this is a guy who should have been one of the top bookers in WCW if they had the chance to get reborn. And I was like, no fucking way. So I like immediately started bugging John. I'm like, hey man, I want to know the story about this. And like, we've become really good friends. The three of us specifically become really good friends over the years. And I have learned more about the ideas behind booking from talking to John than anyone around. Like, I mean, I come from a fiction background, right? Like, my brain goes to fiction, character development, 3.3 storytelling, stuff like that. Talking to John, I learned about wrestling and the differences, and we've had some interesting conversations over the last couple of years. And I'm just gonna say, this dude smelled the canary in the coal mine before it started choking. I mean, it's an honor to kind of talk to you on these things, and kind of like I'm gonna blow you up because now you're not comfortable with it yourself. So I mean, like I love having you here, because I definitely want to hear some stories and pick your brain tonight, man.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Thanks for the kind words. Yeah, I like a low profile. That's just me, but I try to keep a tight circle, that kind of thing. But thank you. I appreciate that.
No, it's like I said, I appreciate your friendship greatly. I know Mike does too. And said I love having conversations with you, and I'm hoping that we can kind of crack open that nut, because I think it's the easiest thing in the world to be an armchair booker, right?
Yeah.
All of us know what every company should do. We all think like Hunter or Tony Khan is stupid, or Scott D'Amore, they're dumb. They don't see they don't see what's obvious, right? And then when I write a book, it's real easy for me to say, okay, this character is going to walk across the street. He does what I tell him to do, no matter what, because he's not real. Pro wrestling is a completely different environment. And like, let's just get started with that, man. Talk about like your philosophies behind what it's like to book a show or book a territory, and kind of what goes into it on like a fundamental level.
Oh, wow. Okay. Honestly, to me, it's I go back to in my first goal is always good wrestling. That's just the framework of it all. There's all kinds of little different philosophies and different approaches involved with everything you do, and they change. There's no rules, or at least there's few rules, I should say. I mean, everybody's going to have their own rules about how they want to approach things and do things. But my goal was always to make sure to have the show end well. That was one of the things. Good wrestling, end the show well. Don't be sucked into rules about what you do in a show as far as the end, right? So, when I book shows, I would end a show with a cruiserweight match, things like that. And of course, it had to be a meaningful one. It wasn't like I just picked any two random cruiser type things. But my goal was very simple. Whatever people leave with, I want it to be a positive. That was one of my goals. It's a cheat code. Okay. So if you have good wrestling as your backbone, you get away with a lot of things. It's really that simple. You get away with a lot of things. You can have mistakes, story, whatever you do. But if you have a great match at the end of your show, people leave smiling. And that's what I try to do. I try to go through every show. I look for ways to make people smile, ways to deliver positive, engagement. Try to get people, and it's not always positive, right? You're obviously going to have heels do some things, and things like that. But my goal is to try to make you laugh, try to make you enjoy yourself, give you good wrestling, send you home happy. That's really my philosophy at the top end of things. Now, stories go into a lot of different detail depending on the story, what you want to do, all that stuff. But that's kind of my goal in every show. Make you smile, make you enjoy, make you laugh, make you angry at some people, send you home happy.
Like,
how do you
go, Mike? I
don't know if you want to go anywhere else. But...
No. I have a good follow-up question, because I think one of the things, and I'm not going to call out any promotion specifically, I'm just going to keep this vague, but I think a lot of the companies that are on television right now are having the trouble balancing between good wrestling and comedy and story. And sometimes there's some weeks where it's like, oh man, it seems like it's just one comedy skit after another. And then they try to book in it with a couple of good matches and hope that you forget about some of the comedy. And I think it was Jeff Jarrett and some other folks are talking about all the different flavors of ice cream. And using that analogy, I've always been the type of guys, like, if you try to please everybody, you're probably going to end up pleasing nobody. And I think that we've seen that with some of the television this year from various companies. How do you figure a way to balance that part of it out, to not get too heavy on one thing versus the other?
I don't know if there's necessarily like a formula. I did prescribe to the smorgasbord type approach. That was how I usually looked at it too. It wasn't necessarily the ice cream approach. I get that. It's the same thing more or less. But on a show, when I would run it, I would try to do a few different things. I wouldn't lean too heavy one way. Think of a product as a scale. And what I mean by that is you want stability. And one side of your scale could be like a negative lean and one is a positive lean. And I always try to make sure that I lean a little positive, if that makes sense. So I don't want to have a lean anywhere. If I go too heavy, if I'm going to go too heavy anywhere, I'm going to go too heavy and giving you guys some kick-ass wrestling. That's my lean. That's my lean. It's going to be that. And I can do some comedy. I can do some WWE shit if I want to do it, but I can make it make sense within my universe. And my universe is based on kick-ass wrestling. It's not based on comedy and bullshit and all that other stuff. Sorry if I get fired up here. I'm a little fired up.
Oh, get fired up, baby. Let's do it.
This is our show.
There's a rule. Yeah, there's a rule to every universe. You set the rules. Those are expectations. Your fans understand them. You can set them yourself. You can move them around a little bit, whatever it is. But you have baseline rules in your universe. You set them. If your audience likes it and responds positively, you run with it. And you don't screw with it. You don't start adding a bunch of bullshit that you didn't do before. You don't start changing your recipe on people abruptly. If you're going to do stuff like that, you've got to do it slowly over time. Otherwise, you don't transition right. You start sending confusing messages to your fan base. They don't know what it is. People get angry at you. They walk away, whatever it is. And the problem with fans is this, is that you don't know when they go away. You start seeing numbers dropping, but you don't know when people give up and don't come back. So my approach is always, I've got my universe. I've got my formula. I've got my lean. The lean's going to be on good wrestling. The other stuff, I'm going to mix. I'm not going to go too heavy. And I can sit there and I can watch a product and I can tell when something leans too far one way on any product. If it's WWE, I know when they go serious. I know when they go too far for their scale. Same thing with AEW. And AEW's been leaning. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, the last couple of weeks, I think they realized, okay, and they've scaled back a little bit. But that lean had been starting for a while. And it was getting worse and worse and worse. But they scaled back. So the last couple of weeks I've liked. They've been better. Mm-hmm. But they did have a lean. And you've got to, when you set your expectations with your fan base and you set your rules of the universe and you start mucking with them, that's when you start having problems. You already have enough influences that can mess with that. External stuff, internal stuff that you can't control, injuries, things like that can change how you mix things and your lean your product. Don't purposely do things like that. Anyway, I'm done. I got fired up for a minute.
No, I mean, like, I think the issue with the 31 flavors analogy is that if I go to the ice cream shop, I'm going to choose the flavor that I like, right? And I'm not going to take the rest of them. When I'm watching a wrestling show, you're basically saying, "Hey, motherfucker, eat this chocolate." And I'm like, "I don't want to eat chocolate. I don't like chocolate ice cream." Well, you're going to have to eat it for at least the next 45 seconds. And that puts a bitter taste in my mouth, literally and figuratively, right? I think that's kind of the issue with like people who talk about that. Well, we want something for everybody. And the problem is, like Mike said, if you try to do something for everybody, you wind up pleasing nobody. And I think we've got a lot of that specifically in the AEW side right now, where a lot of their more hardcore fan base has been, myself included in this, has been kind of turned off by a lot of the storytelling lately. And like I said, we talked about this a while ago, and you sent up red flags to me a long time ago, and I was like, I think you're being overcritical on this one. And there was stuff that I will be the first to say I was wrong. You were like, you saw things, problems creeping up that I did not foresee, and here we are.
Yeah, I'm breaking up on audio. I'm going to drop off and come back in.
Sorry.
Is that all right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I can't hear well. You're breaking up really bad. I'll be right back.
No problem. So like I was saying, like the problem with the 31 flavors analogy, Mike, is that when you're forced to eat what you don't like, it makes you not like the rest of the restaurant. It makes me feel like I have to eat it, you know? And I don't like being forced to eat something I don't like.
Yeah, the thing is that we went through this when we were doing our Brace for Impact show. There were always at least a couple of segments on Impact that we were like, this is stupid, but it was tolerable for the most part. We were like, okay, look, I'm ordering a dinner, and look, I don't want the coleslaw, but they gave me coleslaw, so I'm just not going to eat that, right? Well, if it gets to be where it's like too much, now they're force feeding you to eat it, well, then it's like, okay, God damn, I don't really think that I want that. Now it's spoiling the rest of my dinner. And I think that's where we got to a point there for a little while with Impact where like you quit the show.
Totally.
Yeah. You got there with Impact, and then here lately with AEW. Now John's right. The last couple weeks have been pretty damn good. I thought they've scaled some of the stuff back. We still get Adam. We still get some of that. I skip all the Timeless Tony stuff. I'm over it. That jumped the shark for me a few weeks ago. So I try to skip the bad, that way it doesn't spoil the rest of the show. But I can see where everybody's coming from with some of the problems in that promotion, because look, they made their name and they were created to be the anti-WWE, and then slowly but surely they started to look more and more like a WWE product. And I have a theory as to why that might be. And I think it centers around more than just one person. I think there's a big strategy at play. But John, you were back. JD had asked you a question.
Yeah, I apologize. What was the question, real quick?
I have no memory of what I actually said.
Let me pick up where you guys were then.
Okay.
All right. Without being in the room, it's hard to tell. That's why it's like I want to be critical, but you can't be critical too much because you don't know. And if it's a choice they want to make to move kind of in that way, that's fine, right? It's all about choice. And as a booker, that's your choice. So if that's where Tony Khan wants to go, that's fine. They just need to make sure they do it in such a way where the fans it's a smooth transition, right? That would be how you'd want.
Oh, we lost him again.
Speaking of smooth transitions, that was not.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we bring back John. So JD, before John gets back, I watched Dynamite this morning before my family woke up. I didn't get a chance to watch it last night.
I got through half of it. I got super tired and fell asleep. Not because the show was bad, but because I am exhausted. So yeah.
One thing that really stuck out to me during that show as I watched the Young Bucks versus Pentagon Jr. and Commander. I don't care that they call him Penta Cero Miedo. He's Pentagon Jr. to me. That's what I like to call him. Yeah. So when the moment that the Young Bucks came out on the stage, they look like they would rather be doing anything else in the world than coming out there, even in Ontario, California, close to their hometown, right there in SoCal, in front of their family. Have you ever just noticed like the look on someone's face when you're like, man, they don't really want to be doing that. They don't really want to be here. And then the match wasn't bad because they're all really good wrestlers. They did some cool stuff, but it just seemed like there was just something missing from the Young Bucks. Did you notice that? Did you even get a chance to see that?
I didn't know. I mean, part of me with the Bucks, I'm always thinking I know the narrative that it's in our circles is that the Young Bucks don't care anymore. And I don't know if I buy that, because I think that they enjoy the melodrama aspect of things, and they're
Yeah.
doing that with Kenny. And I thought that they did that. That's a very Young Bucks thing, right? And like I thought that I got the we're too cool for school vibe that they tend to give off when they're doing their heel stuff. I didn't see. I don't give a shit, Young Bucks. I know you're not the first person I've heard say that, but I didn't read that.
I just feel like we've been getting that a lot from them lately, and it's been going around the internet that on the AEW roster page that the EVP titles are no longer on them, but it's still on Kenny. I don't know if that's been like an official thing or if that's a storyline thing. I can't really tell. And the fact that Jeff Jarrett is in SoCal and Sanjay Dutt's in SoCal doing press and the Young Bucks aren't, makes me think that there's some there with those guys. And the match, like I just felt like even though they were doing some cool moves, because that's what they do, and they had some kickouts and they had some super kicks, I just felt like there was something missing from the match. There was an energy to the match that you would normally get with talents like that, and I felt like it was coming from the Young Bucks side. It just seemed like they weren't interested in being there at all. And maybe it's just me. I do know that some other people kind of maybe caught on to it lately. I hadn't really noticed anything like that with them. I know last week the promo that they had with Omega and Jericho, I did not think was a strong promo. Not that they're great promos to begin with, but
they're great, yeah.
But I feel like they've always, when they have a good story to sink their teeth into, they can really get into it. I felt like we didn't get that from them last week, and then seeing their match, it got announced, I think either the day of or the day before, and then they showed up, and it just kind of seemed like they were going through the motions to me. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I did feel that, and that's why I put that as kind of like one of the top topics for discussion on tonight, because I've never seen that from the Bucks before.
I am on the AEW roster page right now, and both Matt and Nick are executive vice presidents.
Oh, so it's back. Okay. All right.
So, and to be frank, AEW has some of the worst social media website people in the game. Jeff Jones sucks at his job. He was not a great manager, and he might be a worse social media manager. So, those kind of things. I don't know, man. There's definitely they definitely aren't the focus of this promotion right now. Perhaps that changes. I mean, like who can be the focus when MJF is literally the lifeblood of this show right now, and he's the most insincere baby face in history. I don't care for any of this stuff, to be quite frank. So,
John, you're back. What do you think of what's been going on with the Young Bucks lately? Have you noticed that they feel less important now than they ever have before to this promotion?
Yeah, it feels that way, and maybe we're starting to see the change where they're going to take a bigger role. Right now they're obviously in a decent enough match, right? We're going to have Jericho and Kenny against them, and that's going to be really good. You have to have confidence in that one. It's got an interesting story with their title shot up on a line, so we'll see where they go. But it could be we're seeing more of them on TV lately, so maybe it'll be a sign of things to come, and we'll start to see them get back on track. I think they're really important to the promotion. They're part of the fabric, so getting them involved would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So the we were talking about Will Ospreay earlier. Now Fightful broke a story earlier today. Well, actually, let me go back even further. Before that, Tony Khan made an announcement on Twitter that now this was yesterday, that at Full Gear, AEW is going to announce the signing of a pro wrestler that everybody in AEW respects, one of the best wrestlers in the world. And so two names immediately popped up.
Nick Nemeth, and I don't know.
Mustafa Ali. No.
Mustafa Ali, yeah.
Yeah. So the two names that really came out immediately were Mercedes Moné and Will Ospreay. Now, Andrew Zarian, who's pretty plugged in guy, especially when it comes to Warner Brothers, he tweeted like a picture of an Ospreay and then like a picture of Larry Bird. Maybe it's a guy from Indiana that's coming in. I don't know, but the two rumors are Mercedes Moné and Will Ospreay. Well, earlier today, Sean Ross Sapp posted in Fightful Select that it is not, in fact, Mercedes Moné, that she might still be hurt, and then she'll probably come to AEW eventually, but it's not going to be this weekend. So do we think it's Will Ospreay, and what kind of an impact would he have here in AEW?
Well, I don't know if you want to go first, JD, but
John,
my thoughts real
you're the
quick.
guest, John.
You're the guest.
All right.
I talk enough.
If it's Osprey, I would hope we'd have a little more fanfare, I guess is the best way of saying that one. Because I think he's the best free agent or best upcoming free agent that there is. Mercedes would be too, right? So I don't know. If it's Osprey, I would hope there's a little more fanfare involved, but we'll see. Maybe they want to do something different this time. I will find out Saturday.
I mean, they're kind of using it as a gimmick to help draw pay-per-view numbers because I got a hunch that they're not trending very well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of Tony's favorite gimmicks is I'm gonna unleash a surprise. I don't think he realizes how much interest he's kind of wallowed through with that. I'm of the mind that it's probably going to be Will Ospreay at this point, right? If the word outright tells you that it's not Monet, it sounds like she really fucked that ankle up pretty bad.
Yeah.
You know, that's the vibe.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does sound serious. Hopefully, she'll be back soon though. But yeah, it does sound serious.
If it's Ospreay and if they're gonna kind of make him sign his contract, they better make a big freaking deal out of this, right? Like he better be showing up in like a stretch limousine and like really, really put it out, like make a big deal because this is a big score for them. You and I have been talking about it for a while that this has been a fight. Like we were seeing this if it's Ospreay this early in the game and they actually could get him before he could really hit free agency, that's a massive coup.
Yeah.
And I would hope, you always want to align delivery and hype, right? So if it's somebody like Ospreay that he signed, this is one of those times where you could say this is a huge deal and really push it and then deliver it and people go, yeah, it was a huge deal, and it helps build your trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying. It's kind of yeah, sure. There's times when you're going to, under promise, over deliver, but I don't think you necessarily have to do that here. If it's Ospreay, you could really run with it and it would live up to it.
Mm-hmm.
Will it be a, sorry, JD, go ahead.
Well, so they have to run. They have to do this because everybody shit on the last announcement. Oh, we got a big announcement coming. Oh, we're going back to London in 9 months.
We already knew that, guys.
Yeah, you told us you were going to do that months ago. Okay. Yeah. Like that was, I feel like he's been panicking a lot lately, which again, I think goes back to booking because like that's something we talk about a lot as fans is like this long-term booking versus this week-to-week stuff. And John, is that hard to shift from a week-to-week mindset to saying, okay, here's the plan for 3, 6, 9 months from now?
Well, no, you can do both. I mean, you can do a thing where some things are that week to week and some things are longer term, but you want your bigger elements to have a bigger plan behind them because you're trying to build and maximize the value on those things. So going week to week is kind of hard. Now, again, we don't know in AEW, what they view or how far out they actually are looking. We don't see that. You can do a mixed blend of week to week and long range. I can't get a read on it right now. Like we talked about the Wembley announcement, there was a major announcement. Fans don't necessarily see it as a major announcement. That's why it was kind of received that way.
I didn't see it as a major announcement.
Right. And then the G1 is kind of like they just let it out in a promo and Collision with really little fanfare. And it's like, people have been waiting for this G1.
Yeah.
I wrote about it in 2019 when I was back when I was with Fansided. Like this has been something that's been speculated about in this company for years, and it really, maybe this isn't accurate, but it really has the fact that Danielson, he's like, all right, Danielson's going to be in there, and he looks like a goddamn mummy.
Yeah, he's patched up, but you know what? He's going to be the best damn mummy you've ever seen.
Oh, I agree with that, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying
don't disrespect one Ron Reese, WCW legend. Don't disrespect the 7-foot monster.
Mike, he wasn't a mummy. He was a Yeti.
Yeti, yeah.
Yeti.
Yeah.
My joke with Danielson is that he could wrestle in a suit of armor, and it's going to be good. You just anything he's got, he's going to deliver. It's going to be great. But my G1, I had a G1. I ran G1s at the independent level, and my WCW pitch had a G1 in it, the one that got me hired.
Let's hear it.
Anyway,
Yeah,
no,
Mike,
it was just a junior heavyweight one. It's
Oh,
nothing
okay.
major, it's just a junior heavyweight one. But that was part of it because the whole thing was, cruiserweight and trying to establish things. So I used a G1 to build the story that I had for Chavo and then also establish some characters for some people, and just storylines. But yeah, the G1 thing was like it kind of just released out there and everybody's waiting for it. That's something you could really trumpet. And again, it would be like Osprey. You could really trumpet that. And then you start building that thing of where whatever you say is big, whatever it has to align.
Here's what I'm hoping is I hope on that pay-per-view show on Saturday that they announce if I'm on the creative team, if I'm sitting in Tony Khan's private jet whispering evil things into his ear like a person who made me quit the Impact show, I would be saying, hey, we should unleash an awesome kick-ass video, introduce all the participants, hype the fuck out of this thing because we want to make it a big deal and make it a big deal. Like, I think that's one thing that sometimes I think Tony promotes well, and sometimes I think he kind of under promotes things that should be hyped up.
Yeah, you can see mix of that. What I honestly thought was, and I don't know where they are in their planning on this or how far ahead they are yet. I would want to start building. The idea is that you want this G1 to take place across all the shows, build your synergy, right? And I would have thought we'd get one of the pools at least by now. But I mean, everybody does things different. Maybe he's going to roll the pools out all at once in a big video, like you said. But you could have released this week on Dynamite. You could have at least maybe told people what was coming next week's Dynamite, but they might not want to get ahead of themselves. But yeah, you want to get it coming and just build it up. Because everybody wants to know who's in the pool. You can have an announcement for that. You can run a segment on it, promote it up, whatever you want to do. But yeah, there's opportunities there to hype it if they want.
If this new signing is Will Ospreay, I think that the second entrant that they're going to want to announce is Will Ospreay, because if you're bringing him in, don't you want him to be a part of your G1, right?
I would, yeah, if he's in it.
Yeah.
Or I mean, if he's signed, he's the one, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, and that's where I would go. And before I'm sorry, Jade, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
please.
Just question for both of you guys: if they bring in Ospreay and he's managed by Don Callis, is that a disappointment to you guys?
No,
okay. Not at the start. I think you keep where he is going, and then you take it from there.
Why is that a disappointment?
I've seen that online. They're like, oh, he's just going to come in and Don Callis is going to steal his heat. And I've seen that on Twitter a couple of times. I have not responded because I just
ignore those crazy people.
Yeah. So I was just curious to see what you guys thought.
Okay, John, if I'm wrong, feel free to say no, JD, you're dumb. But I think the long-term money in Ospreay is a baby face, right?
Yes,
they have him working as a heel. So I mean, like, can't that be part of the story? And then, like, I know we can take a journey with him, right? Like, you sign him, Callis makes a big deal, like he's in this storyline right now, and then you can go to town with him. Like, Dave had a great suggestion. Like, if there is Will Ospreay, you crown him, you put the title on him at Wembley. Yes. Because then, we always talked about, like, I wasn't a big fan of doing something with Will until you knew you had him. If they've got him, then you start booking this out. Sorry, Max, the title's coming off you eventually, right? Yeah. And you get it on Will Ospreay in Wembley Stadium, because that's a moment, right? Am I nuts?
No, that's where you have to go. He's got to be a babyface winning at Wembley.
Yeah. So we've been getting some comments in the chat, and I've seen it on Twitter too, that Tony Khan would not ruin the relationship. So this comes from Renee Valdez. Tony Khan isn't going to destroy the New Japan relationship just so he can poach Ospreay. But here's my counter to that. And Dave and Brian talked about this on their show. They're partners. They might just have an agreement in place, and New Japan would much rather Ospreay go to AEW, so that way they could still probably get some dates on him for some of their bigger shows, as opposed to going to WWE where he becomes essentially a ghost to them. He's like that, where they might change his name and they might do all this other stuff. But in AEW, you're still going to get some dates on him. You still get to see him.
Right, and if you're New Japan, it's definitely because Will said he's gone. Will told everybody he's gone.
Yeah.
And if you're New Japan and you want him, you can. This is the advantage they have, is the fact that Tony Khan, it does have a relationship with them, and with Rocky Romero specifically, they can go, hey man, here's what we'll do. You sign with them now, do a contract. You're out in February, and then you can come back whenever you want or whenever we need you. And he doesn't. I think that's a much better deal. And then you never let him get on the free agent market in the first place. It serves New Japan much better to have Will Ospreay in AEW. Hey, by the way, John, who is Will Ospreay wrestling at Wrestle Kingdom? Refresh my memory.
John Moxley and Finley.
Who cares about Finley? John Moxley. Who does John Moxley's regular contract with?
AEW.
Thank you. Like,
yeah.
Like this is like best case scenario to both of them. And if so, that's actually a smart business move. John, you said something before about knowing where things are going from week to week, and especially like the audience knowing what the matches are. As an avid comic fan, like stories always go from week to week and from month to month, and you kind of have an idea about where stuff is going thereon. I will never understand why wrestling shows don't book to build next week's matches. You know, like I don't understand that. Why is that so difficult? Why is it so difficult for fans to know? Why is it so difficult for them to tell us what's going to happen next week on the show?
It's hard to say without being there to know what they want to do.
Not just AEW, but anybody.
Yeah,
WWE too.
Well, I mean, you'll see it. You see it in between. Like you'll see it sometimes. It happens for a little while where they'll put lines in the sand and build to something, and then you'll see them back off of it. Different products, right? I favor the idea of knowing what's coming a week out. You don't have to get locked into it. You know what I mean? As far as the announcements and plotting ahead, you do want to set lines in the future though, where you can build things. And if you don't think that way, it becomes very hard to keep momentum behind everything. Your product, your talent, all that stuff works based on momentum. And if you're not, you have to plan out to some degree. And it's just as a fan, I think it helps. You don't have to do everything that way, but having a few things here and there where you know, okay, well, next week is this, next week is that, and you know a week out. And to me, like the G1 point I mentioned earlier, if your idea is to have synergy across the shows, which is what this gives you, start getting people into that now.
Yeah.
Start announcing, announce your pools, get them out there. Maybe they got a big rollout video that'll be awesome. And then you're like, okay, you have to wait and see what they're going to do. So it could work out. But yeah, you do want to know like a little bit out in advance. And you don't have to have seen people say this too and ignore this, that you need to have the whole thing mapped out, the whole G1, and you need to know what it's going to be at the end and all this. You don't have to do that. You just have to stay ahead. You can have it internally, but you don't have to have it all announced. New Japan does that, but you don't have to. It's not a rule. As long as you know like a week out what's coming. So you just make sure you stagger out your big matches across the different shows. Make sure people know a little bit ahead of time that they're coming, and you're fine.
John, the reason I kind of talked to you about this coming on tonight is Dave Meltzer has always talked about your Jericho pitch, the story that you went with to WWF in 2001? 2001? Am I right?
2001, April 2001.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's the year WCW collapsed. So you were on board. You were going to book. This is official, by the way. This is reality for people listening. John was going to be the booker of the cruiserweight division in the Fusion Media led WCW. That didn't happen. So then you got a shot to write with WWE, and Dave Meltzer is always like, it always comes out in random, Wrestling Observer radio. So he'd be like, oh yeah, the John Muse Jericho pitch is like the best story that's never been done.
Yeah.
Right.
Like parts of it have been done.
Well, yeah, wink, wink. So, like, can you? Like, I think a lot of people, like me specifically, and again, I only know this because I know you. Can you tell us what? Because again, Mike and I are pushing. I don't know. You didn't hear us there. Mike and I are gonna, while we're on break for the holidays, we're gonna release our WCW Invasion 2-part.
Oh, okay.
And it's re-released basically. So I'm a big fan of like alternate history stories. So what I would like you to talk about this. Yeah, no comment. Can you tell us a little bit about what could have been if Stephanie McMahon was actually good at her job at writing the television show?
All right. So we'll take a step back real fast and then we'll go forward. I didn't go to them. They came to me. they reached out to me. Now, my history with WWF actually, and I'll say WWF now because this is really what they were when we were talking about all this. My history with them goes back to 1991. People don't really know that, but that's when it started. I sent things over to them. I took advantage of a timeline. I was just a goofy fan, right? Still am. I sent some ideas to them in 1991, and they started calling my house. They started sending me legal releases and things like that. So that's how far back my history with them goes.
Did you come up with the Cobra?
What's that?
The Cobra with Jake the Snake? Was that you?
No.
Been way cooler if it was. I'm sorry.
Sorry. No, I didn't pitch a Cobra bite.
Just messing around. Continue.
Yeah, no, we're good. But I sent them like 3 months of plans back in 91. I sent it when most of the office except for Vince was gone to Europe. And then I got, within a week, I got certified letters from them, and they started calling my house, talking to my mom. Good times. So that happened then. Then in the mid 90s, I did some things too that were on their request. And then 2001 came. And what I think happened with 2001 was I think they found out what Bischoff had been planning. And then they started kind of exploring some of those avenues. But I got called from their office on a Friday near the end of the day. I don't want to say the name, but anyway, it's somebody that would have the authority called me up and said, "We want you to pitch." And then they told me what they wanted me to pitch. And what they wanted me to pitch was launching WCW. And the rules, they kind of had some parameters involved. Let me get my notes here. Basically, they wanted to launch WCW as separate. This is another thing too. People always give Dave a hard time. WWF wasn't going to do. WWF was going to launch WCW. Okay, you don't start calling people up asking them to pitch launches if you're not going to launch. They wanted to launch it as a separate brand and get the war going. They wanted me to use the McMahon family problems as a driver, and there would be TV and pay-per-view for WCW. But they wanted me to launch WCW. That's what they wanted me to pitch. They asked for that. The normal creative process for WWF at the time was they would send you some materials and you would send them 2 pitches. And it would be whatever you wanted. It just had to involve their people. There was like there was some parameters around it. But you would send them whatever 2 ideas you wanted. This case was different. They wanted me to send them something specific. So that's how that got started. Anything else, or you want to go forward with the idea itself?
No, go forward with the idea. We're anxious to hear it.
We were both on mute. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, so, I'm sorry. My daughter was outside my office singing a song, so I had to mute.
I had the hillbilly train running through town, so I apologize for that on my end too.
Yeah, so they called me and asked me to do that, so I got working on that piece, and then over the next week or so, I started going through the idea itself, and then I had to build a resume for them, so I had to write a whole bunch of stuff down, and did all that. Then the idea itself. Basically, the idea is it's Jericho. He was going to be the catalyst to be, the guy to be the star, at least as far as WCW when it starts. I don't know if you wanted to really walk through it, but the idea is that Vince McMahon wants to kill WCW in the crib. And he was going to use Jericho as a surrogate to steal the title and take it back to him. That's the premise. In storyline purposes, Jericho was going to have X amount of time left on his contract. If you recall at that window, Jericho was in a feud with, I think, Steve Regal, Triple H, Steph, Vince, the whole deal, right? The whole family was against him and Regal was against him at the time. So we were going to create a line, basically the Starrcade, planning it out because this is several months of an idea. Starrcade was going to be the end of Chris Jericho's contract, is what the idea was. And then the goal was he was going to bring the title back to Vince on the next Monday Night Raw. So if you think about it in other terms, it's kind of similar to the whole Punk wins a title from Cena on the last day of his contract. It's in that. Go ahead.
It took them 10 years to actually do the story that you had pitched to them. I wonder if they like just remembered that. It's like, remember that pitch that John Muse made about Jericho? We should do that with CM Punk.
I don't know. Yeah, it could. I mean, it's just it's hard to say if they remembered that or they just came up on their own. And who knows? But all they did for me, which I'm happy with, is that they proved the idea worked.
Yeah.
It was an expiring contract deal. So, I mean, I don't know how deep you want to go into the idea itself. I can do some walkthrough and high moments because I had it broken down into chapters when I sent it to them. It was 10 pages.
Wow. That's a hell of a pitch. I've always liked this idea because I think that Chris Jericho would have been the smarter character to use as the WCW guy because he was a WCW guy. In real life, WWF went and got him because of the work he had done in WCW. So this makes complete sense to me. Please, I mean, whatever you feel comfortable talking with, we like listening to you.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks. So what happened is this would have been, the goal was to have, because again, I'm trying to launch the product, right? So what we were going to do is the beginning stages of it are all part of WWF, and then we would start merging. We would launch WCW, and we would have back and forth stuff going on. Because again, we're trying to keep the synergy between the shows and the audiences to where they want to watch across both shows. So that was kind of the flow that I took with it. And then there would be the point where the products would officially separate, where you wouldn't have as much mingling, although the story would have Vince promoting it, because again, the whole idea at the end was that Jericho was going to bring the title back and present it to Vince. And then WCW would be launched and have pay-per-views by that point. So if you remember back in that time frame too, the McMahon family strife, the idea behind it would be that each family member would have 25% ownership of WWF. So, Linda, Vince, Shane, Steph, all 25%, which gives Shane the ability to be on WWF TV. Shane would be the only owner of WCW. So that's kind of sets our framework. So we would start this whole thing off with a very simple vignette or interview or whatever not interview, but vignette or some sort of, how you do the camera stuff. And everybody that's listening, please give me this, grant me this favor. Understand, this is a 20-something-year-old idea. So some of the tropes, if I hit on them, they weren't as bad then as they are now. So if I suggest something, you go, well, that's dumb. Okay. Roll 20 years off the clock on that. Okay. Because I look back and read some of the stuff and I go, yeah, I wouldn't do that now because different time and place. So what we would have is
most of the stuff they actually did was really dumb too. So let us not forget that.
Yeah, I want to give myself that little leeway of, hey, look, yeah, I get it. Some of the stuff I might go, that's stupid, but it's 20 years ago. So the idea is that Shane's going to be launching WCW, so he's recruiting. So we have a little setup. A little interview between Shane, or a little vignette between Shane and Jericho, where Shane's trying to talk to him about coming over, and Jericho establishes that he has 6 months left on his deal. So we set that groundwork 6 to 8 months. We set it up right at the start before anybody really realizes where we're going with it. We set our contract time frame, and then we're good there. So then we set up the frustration, right? Because Jericho's been frustrated with Vince and all that other treatment. We have him set up with a match against another contender for the IC title. Jericho wins it. So this would naturally position him as the guy to get an Intercontinental title shot. So then, next week, Vince has an announcement and he gives the title shot to the guy that Jericho just beat. Again, he's screwing with Jericho. So then Jericho comes out and confronts Vince. And in long story short, he more or less asks for a release right there and storms off, which pisses Vince off, as you can imagine, right? Because he embarrassed him on TV. Jericho just says, I'm done. This is nonsense. I'm out of here. He goes. And then we just go from there. So then we go to the back. We see Jericho packing his bags. They're like, well, what are you going to do? You can't go anywhere. He goes, I can go home. So as he's packing his bags, we go back. Vince interrupts a match, demands Jericho come out. So then Jericho comes out, and he says, who the hell are you? Embarrass me on TV, that kind of stuff. So then we set the stage. And Vince accuses, Jericho, Shane put you up to this, didn't he? That kind of stuff. Jericho says, I'm done. I want out. I'm sick of you, your daughter, your son-in-law, your commissioner. I'm just done. Vince says, I'm not going to let you walk away. And then we go back and forth and challenges are thrown out. And essentially what we get is Jericho is going to set himself up for a match where if Jericho wins, the contract is transferred to Shane. That's the key point in there. As soon as this happens, as soon as Jericho throws this out and Vince wants his piece of it too, Jericho puts his hair on the line. Triple H music comes out, Triple H wants a match. And that's where we go to at that point. So we set up the whole thing where Jericho wins against Triple H. He gets to go transfer to WCW and he gets to go to Shane and gets away from Vince and the bullshit. If Triple H wins, Jericho loses his hair. And that's what we do there. And that's a pay-per-view match. And Jericho naturally would win. And the idea behind there, and we do some teasing on this, is that there would be a point in the match where Vince can help Triple H, but he doesn't. A little bit of a seed, because you realize you don't know at the time that they're kind of working together in their own way. So Vince burns Triple H by not helping him. Jericho wins, but you don't really point it out. It just happens in the background. So that's where we're at to that point. And that's how Jericho gets his contract transferred to Shane. Any questions? Anything on that one? I don't need to keep talking and talking and talking.
No, you're fine. We're just listening to the. Yeah, we're just listening.
I love creative process stuff, so
Yeah.
I'm digging this right now.
I can't pinpoint probably where this thing went sideways though with WWF.
Yeah, I kind of got a hunch where you went wrong.
he pitched Jericho beating Triple H, and they were like, nope, not in 2001.
Yeah, I know. Well, silly me. I recognize Jericho had this stuff to be the guy, but and I thought because here's the other thing too is that I gave them the out. You can only write an idea to certain points. I gave them the out. Vince burns Triple H here. Triple H is going to bring this up later as part of the problem, to where when Jericho comes back with the belt, Triple H could be the guy to come out and make a deal then and beat him. He can get his win back, but we had to build somebody out of this.
Yeah.
Turns out you're wrong. They didn't have to build anybody out of this, and nobody got built.
Yeah, well, that's what can you do on that one? I had the right goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is all timed basically to when WCW is going to launch as a show. So, and through this time he's been recruiting guys. So the basic when WCW comes back with Nitro, we've got Jericho debuting. There's the idea. Who else Shane might have taken, and then Vince would have promised that he's going to show up. So that's how we would launch it, and that's kind of the hook that we would have there. That was, you didn't want to just do a cold start or a cold launch for their show. You had to give them something, so that was the idea. So the first show, you do little stupid things that they do. Shane's warning security, warning things that Vince is going to do this or Vince is going to try, and you have Vince trying, right? You show him doing things, trying to get in, whatever else you want to do. Then the main event would essentially be, well, actually prior to the main event, there'd be something going on in a parking lot. And this is one of those tropes. I apologize for everybody for 20 years ago. We'd have Big Show destroy Shane's limo, destroy it, do that whole deal, and fight security. The idea is that we want to build towards Big Show involved in this. So that goes on. I apologize. Vehicle destruction. It happens all the time. Then in the main event, we'd have Booker T and Jericho as a team against a couple of heels, whatever we're going to do. A lot of these things I didn't fill in because you don't need them. They're not the high points. Right. And, I can't book, I could sit there and I could write them a nice little great little 10-page idea and have, Nash and Hall and Flair and Sting and Goldberg and all the guys that they didn't have at the time or weren't even rumored to have. I could do that, but then we're in fantasy land. I try to stay grounded.
Because you were trying to get a real job. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I can't, if I sit there and I say, yeah, you're going to sign all these guys that you got to pay balloon payments to or whatever else they had on their contracts, and they go, we can't do that. they're just going to close the page and they're going to walk away from my idea.
Mhm.
It has to stay real, at least. Maybe that's what happened, is they saw the Triple H job and said, not real, and then bailed. Anyway, so the idea in this tag match is that Booker and Jericho win, and then as the match ends, Vince jumps the rail in disguise. And he tries to run off with the WCW title. Again, that's the goal. We don't know it yet, but that's the goal. So Vince tries to jump the rail, steal the belt. He gets caught. Vince would hit somebody in the fray, a WCW employee, the whole deal. Then it ends with Vince in the ring getting, Booker T's finishing move, that kind of stuff. So that's how the first Nitro ends. And then we start trying to separate the products. Out of what Vince did and what Big Show did, Shane threatens a lawsuit because, again, they have no rights and privileges there, and they interrupted the show, did all this other stuff, such that Vince has to settle. And part of the terms for Vince settling is that Booker T and Jericho are going to face Big Show and Vince in a tag match on Nitro. So then you get them into that way. See, it's just back and forth, right? I'm trying to make sure people have the reason to watch between the shows. So that's what that is. And that's why I did the Big Show, destroying the vehicle, blah, blah, blah. And of course, in this match, just to show that I didn't have a thing about Triple H, Jericho pins Big Show. We're trying to build Jericho. Yeah. That's how the tag match ends. Let me see. And then over the next... Go ahead.
Well, I like that you added the courtroom stuff, because that was very much like what WWF was doing back in those days. They
100%.
Their skits, and they've done several like courtroom type skits too. So
I don't
take it to the court.
I don't take it to the court. I don't take it to the court. Basically, all it is just like a threat back and forth with lawsuits. Where at most we're having Vince on like a little phone on his desk or whatever, and the lawyers are like, you got to settle. It's not a courtroom thing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just I try to keep it simple. I'm not going to have the D'Lo Brown wasn't going to be the judge of this one. Impact all that, folks.
No, this would have just been like a just a segment, right? Like an in-ring.
Yeah. It's just there'd be a few segments that play out across the show, and then
Clarence Mason would have been the lawyer, of course. You have to have it has to be Clarence Mason.
Why? Yeah, exactly. Why not? So we go back and forth, and then. Let me see where I go next. So now we start working at the next layer, which is the ownership stake. The idea we're setting up is that Shane can go at will on WWF programming. Vince can't. You go to WCW. So we set up a match where the ownership stake is in play. So it would be Vince versus Shane. Sorry, I know the match would suck. It happens. WWF pay-per-view, though. With the idea of if Vince wins, he gets Shane's 25%. Shane, this is how we separate the products. And if Shane wins, he gets Vince's 25%, right? So this is the stakes. And then what would happen out of this is that because of what's at hand, the way it would work and be worded on the stipulation of this match is that nobody in WWF can help Vince. Nobody in WCW can help Shane. There's nothing that says nobody from WCW can help Vince. So that's what happens. So you go through the whole match. Vince looks like he's in deep trouble, going to lose 25% of the promote of WWE, his 25%, so he'd be out, right? Jericho helps Vince win, and that's how you realize that the turn was in play. And that's how he can do it, because it's WCW technically helping Vince, not in turn. So Vince wins. Shane's 25%. Vince reveals the plan. Jericho's going to get the WCW title and bring it back to me in 6 months, or whatever time was left. Then we go right out into that. I'm trying to read. I'm sorry. I'm reading this stuff. It's not all off the top of my head. This would be the window where Triple H would be upset. Not that night, but the following Monday Night Raw, because obviously Vince knew, but he didn't clue in Triple H, Steph. This would also be part of pissing Steph off. So that's what happens there. So you can do whatever you want to do with Triple H at that point. And then that's where we go on to. So now we're separated. Vince isn't going to be on WCW TV anymore as far as showing up or anything like this. But now Shane has an infiltrator that's going to try to take his title. Over on, let me see. Sorry, I apologize for
No,
silence.
you don't have to go. You don't have to go beat by. You don't have to
Feel
go
free to
beat by
jump in.
beat with all of it either. You can just kind of give us some bullet points too, if it makes it
Yeah,
easier.
yeah. So the bullet points are, he's over there now, and Shane also does this. We're not playing it. We're not being stupid about this. Shane does have his moment where he says, "Okay, look, that's fine. Whatever. You're here. I got to deal with you for 6 months, but I'm going to make your life hell. If you thought what Vince did was bad before, I'm going to make it worse, and you're never going to get a WCW title shot. I'm sorry. I'm just not going to give it to you. It's never going to happen. You're done." So we do kind of cover that, because why would he give him a title shot if we already
Right.
revealed the plan, right? But what this all sets up is an angle where Chris Jericho is going to put Linda McMahon in the walls of Jericho.
Nice.
So that's what it builds to, and we have a little bit of thing. I'm going to cut through a lot of this right here.
That's Trump on Trump crime right there. Jericho
yeah, well, this is way before Trump. So, long story short is that
January 6th exploding all over the place.
Yeah, Vince and Jericho manipulate Linda into being at Nitro, and Shane is manipulated at being someplace else. So then what we have is Jericho with Linda in the ring on Nitro, Shane McMahon on the screen. And it's basically, you've got to give me a title shot at the pay-per-view, which will be their first pay-per-view. You got to give me a title shot or I'm going to hurt your mom. And then you'd see that Vince is standing there and he would have a contract for Shane to sign. So Vince comes in. And, Shane agrees. Jericho goes to release Linda. Linda slaps him. Jericho grabs her back, and then he looks to Vince, and Vince gives Jericho the evil Vince look and thumbs down. Basically, Vince greenlights Jericho hurting Linda. And then he puts her in the walls of Jericho. And that's how we end that.
That's a very 2001 ending to a Raw.
Yeah.
This was Nitro. This was Nitro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But WWF, yeah.
But it fits WWF era, like at the time, what they were doing.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, so we go to the pay-per-view now. Jericho wins a belt. And then here's where the chase turns now. Is Jericho trying to get the title. Now it's WCW trying to get the title from Jericho. We start off the Nitro right after the pay-per-view, and here's where we put a twist in. People should like this one. Jericho's going to address the fans, and that they need to pay close attention to his entrance, is what we were told. So the Jericho countdown starts, and you know how it had the countdown, 3, 2, 1 or whatever it was, and then yeah, exactly.
I remember.
We've changed the timer. The timer is now the days, hours, and minutes until his contract expires.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So that's what that does. And then he comes out and he basically tells everybody, look, this is it. I'm taking the title. WCW is going to be dead before it really got started. You'll never, ever see it again. And that's how that does. Then Shane comes out, of course, because we can't let him have the last word on that. And then Shane just basically tells Jericho, look, okay, that's fine. But between now and when your contract expires, you're going to be wrestling a lot of title matches, and we're going to do everything we can do to get the title. So what this does is this gives importance to every single match he has, even house shows at the time, because house shows were bigger. Mm-hmm. So the idea would be, he's defending this title all over the place. So then we set up, obviously there'd be another pay-per-view here is my plan. And what we would set up here is a War Games. It would be not a title match situation, but it'd be a War Games, because we're going to bring somebody back now. So you'd have Jericho's team. The idea is that the War Games was set up because, Shane wants Jericho to get his ass kicked in a cage and weaken him. He's trying to weaken him down. And we bring back at this point, Big Papa Pump, Scott Steiner. He'd be the guy. I got pages of Steiner ideas that I never got to do, by the way, that were going to be hopefully pitched to WCW if I had been there. Steiner would come back, and then we would set up Jericho's final title defense, and that would be against Scott Steiner. So that was the idea there, is that he'd come back. And I'd written a promo in there, basically, that, let me see. Steiner would basically tell him something like, can't stand him because he's going to take the title back to his daddy in Connecticut, and just all you can imagine what Steiner would say, right?
Yeah.
And this stuff. And that was that.
He would add a lot more colorful language, I imagine, too.
I do write that. Let me see, something like, "Yeah, you're nothing but Vince McMahon's bitch until Starrcade, and then you're gonna be my bitch." That kind of stuff. That's the stuff he would say.
Holla if you hear me.
Yeah, exactly. All that stuff, dude. I had so much stuff for Steiner. And then basically, just Jericho retains. He keeps the title, and we set up the big victory party the next day on Raw, and that's when the idea ends. I did give them some options. I had options I didn't write down because, of course, I didn't know them. What would happen. But that was the idea. He'd retain it and take it back because we want to get that big thing on Raw the next day. And my plan was, because, of course, Vince had greenlight the beating on Linda, that now his whole family turned against him. Linda and Steph would have 50% to Vince's 50%, so they can do things. So in the back of my mind, the idea was Jericho would come back. They would sign somebody like Flair or Sting to a one-day WWF contract, and then they would book the match on Raw, where Jericho would have to defend. Shane could say it's a title match, and that's how you get the title back to WCW. You could reintroduce Flair, that whole deal, or Sting, if they wanted to pay them. But, I didn't book that far out.
Yeah. Well, your idea was about, let me do some Steiner math, about 3 billion times better than what they actually ended up doing.
Numbers don't lie.
The numbers don't lie. And because, we talk about it. So everybody stay tuned next week, right here on Thanksgiving. We're going to release our WCW Invasion storyline. WCW Raw or WCW Nitro was going to replace Raw at one point. So this was very much on the table. So John was not writing just to write. This was a pitch for a company that was absolutely going to exist. And the best thing to do would have been to incorporate the WWF stuff onto WCW and have them cross-pollinate a little bit to make sure that WCW was on the level of the WWF. And I thought that you did that very well.
Well, thanks. And that was the goal because, again, and the timing too worked out was this was going to be your December Starrcade. So if you're thinking long range, this is just the first salvo of a war. We haven't even thought about invasions or cross promotion matches or interpromotional matches. Really, this is the start, and it would have timed out to where you're in December, and now with Linda and Steph having equal power to Vince, they could enforce or bring together an actual either war or interpromotional situation. You could do that if you wanted, but they just wanted to launch it, and that was the idea. And here's the other thing too. Is that I was paying attention. They held on to this for 5 or 6 weeks without hearing anything from them. And I was watching Raw, and they did, I don't remember what it was at the time. I remember the feeling, but I don't remember the instance. But basically they did something on Raw where I said, oh shit, they just broke the canon on my idea.
Oh man.
And then within a week I had the rejection.
Wow.
So does that mean anything? Is it just timing? Is it coincidence? Or is it one of those ones where if we're going to go with it, we'll maybe do business with him? Or, once they decided they weren't, it was done. I don't know. But that was about the timing, because I sat there watching, I was patiently waiting, and, then they broke the canon. I'm like, I'm done. And then I got the nice little Stephanie rejection letter.
So. And that's what sucks is that she basically pushed herself onto the creative team during the company's hot phase, and the shows were not good, and they started really losing steam before WrestleMania 17, right? They really do. The shows start going down, ratings are starting to slip, everything's starting to move down, and then the invasion happens and people are excited again, so it goes up, and then within weeks it's a fucking disaster. It's a fucking disaster. And it breaks my heart because I hear this well thought out idea in this character stuff, and it being around a guy that everybody that was a fan in the era wanted to see get to the next level, right? Everybody wanted to see Chris Jericho ascend, and they just didn't do it. They just refused to actually move forward. This is the era when Chris Jericho's feuding with Kane because he got coffee spilled on him, right? And all that kind of stuff. Like this is what they were. This is like the genius of Stephanie McMahon. She fucking sucked. And it was a terrible era of television. And I hate the rose-colored glasses of what the Attitude Era really was. It was a lot of bad TV. And this would have been a lot better.
Yeah, and then people will point to the fact that Jericho beat The Rock and Stone Cold on the same night. But okay, yeah, he did, and he got those titles. But then he became like Stephanie McMahon's like understudy, like right after that. You know what I mean? And like they made him look like a pansy. He was walking her dog all the way up into WrestleMania 18. And then they blamed that whole title run on him, like he was the failure, when really it was just the creative. He was just another cog in the McMahon machine, just feuding with Triple H, and he was Stephanie McMahon's bitch. Like he beat Stone Cold and The Rock, and it meant dick because of the way that they treated him afterwards. And I don't know. They never, they never really wanted to get behind Jericho, and then they kind of gave him a half-assed opportunity, and then just bitched him out quick.
Yeah. Stephanie.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, let's just say this. I mean, the way that worked out, I took great pleasure when the first AEW champ, the first time there was competition against WWF, the first champ was Jericho. I took a lot of pleasure out of that one.
Because that was your guy in your story that never quite hit it. And it's like I said, it's a shame because it's better. And I know I did an article about your elite storyline, well, I should say, from WCW that would have relaunched the cruiserweight division, and that was certainly better than what we had with WCW because what we had was nothing. So I mean, like, it was a shame that it's a shame that these exist as alternate universe takes.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the way, it's all time and place, right? And the other thing about the WCW piece is, and this is, and I'll say this too, because I know Eric gets a bad rap, and often deservedly so.
He's an idiot. Continue.
Yeah, but in 2001, just so everybody understands, in 2001, when they brought me out there to meet him, I went there with the idea of looking for a reason to say this is going to fail. Whatever he wanted to do was going to fail. I went there with that because, again, I didn't trust the situation. I was more than happy to take it because it was exciting, but I went there thinking, all right, well, I've got my list of questions I'm going to ask. I'm going to listen to him talk. I'm going to let him tell me what he can tell me. I'm waiting for the failure point. And throughout that conversation, he said everything I needed to hear that made me think, all right, this can be different than what it was. In other words, I had hope. And I went there thinking there would be no hope. Just so everybody knows. He said everything he needed to say. The cruiserweights were going to be separate. I wasn't going to have to worry about people. Of course, things can change. I wasn't going to have to worry about people jobbing out my guys. The idea behind it was get guys over. Some guys would move out of the cruiserweights, so there would be actual momentum and we can move the product forward. All the things that I needed to hear, I heard from Eric. And he was talking to Dave at the time. Another thing everybody else needs to understand, he was listening to Dave. The nonsense the nonsense he says and things about Dave he says, he was listening to Dave, and that was one of his more coherent times. Okay. So I even asked, and I got greedy as it went. Once I knew what he was heading towards, I asked for a seat at the table on the other stuff too. And he said yes. So I wasn't going to be in my own little universe with the cruisers. I would have had input into other areas. Now, whether or not they listened, who knows, but it was not just you're off in your little corner with your cruisers. And he wanted to have a relationship with Japan, so anyway, we missed out,
man. Eric Bischoff.
I mean, even if it couldn't have been me, I would have liked that to happen.
Yeah,
Stu Snyder and Brad Siegel had other ideas. They wanted to sell the WWF from the get-go.
Yes.
And kind of use Bischoff as a patsy to get that deal done, right? When you really, like I said, I got a conversation with Guy Evans a couple weeks ago, and it was interesting going back and look at that Nitro book because they really talk about that. And now Bixen Sellner did a really good thing too, talking about how the Bischoff thing was never going to happen. They just let him kind of dangle on a hook while they tried to figure out how they can make the sale to WWF work, which is again another just tremendous shame. Eric Bischoff, he's a douche. Imagine what kind of a douche you have to be to have a podcast with him.
yeah. But hey, John, man, yeah, John, hey, we really appreciate you coming on, man, and finally getting the chance to tell us this story. This was awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's been great. You're always welcome to come on to here. And guys, everybody in the chat, thank you very much. Thank you, Joe, AC Twan, Renee, Josiah, Jason Bryant, King of the North, and David Hadley. Thank you all for being here in the chat. And if you're listening to this video, or if you're listening to this podcast, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast, please head over to our premium site, patreon.com/The Mike and JD Show, where we have all of our premium content there. We're actually going to be recording in overtime as soon as this is over, and we'll get that out to you soon. And then next week I'll have another overtime where hopefully, like, sometime this weekend, JD and I are going to get together to talk about the Hall of Famers that just got announced by Wrestling Observer newsletter. I was hoping that we get to break the news while John was on the air and get some insight from him, but they still have not posted the damn newsletter, even though it's basically Friday where you guys are at. So I was hoping that we could do that. So we're going to have to table that and hopefully get to it this weekend. So everybody stay tuned for that. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give us a big thumbs up. Make sure that you're a subscriber and then lay down a comment. John Muse, thanks as always. And I want everybody to do John Muse a favor. Go to Max and watch Banshee. It will change your life. I guarantee it.
Yes.
He sold me on it. And I was like, you know what, John, I love you. I respect. I'm going to give this a shot. And I love that show. I want everybody to check out Banshee in honor of John Muse.
Thanks. That's the best plug.
Yes.
I'm telling you, you will not be. Of course, there is sexual content, so don't watch it
with Lana,
with CJ Perry.
Yeah, she's in there. Episode 6, season 1. I'm telling you, everybody listening, it's a great show, great action. It's like 80s action movies mixed with some wrestling and fights, and it's great stuff. And the plot is tight, and it has a great closing. 4 seasons, it'll be good.
Yes, great stuff. All right, everybody, and until next time, mahalo.
Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you watch your A game. Ain't made no rain from the track when we unite and spit. This isn't A game, better bring your A game. Competition starting to get thick, it's the click, so I hope you watch your A game. Ain't made no rain from the track when